Alright, you're watching Lit Sports Online again. We're going to be talking about UFC 240, Holloway versus Edgar. Before we get into the preview of that pay-per-view, Pat, I believe you have some things that already happened a couple weeks ago you want to discuss?
Yeah, I just quickly wanted to mention Uriah Faber returning. Successful, return fight against Ricky Simon. Came out, got his first knockout in 12 years after retiring almost 3 years ago. He's been, coaching people ever since. He's been managing, running the team. He has a bunch of gyms. He has a pro fight team with a bunch of other guys, known names like Chad Mendes, who recently retired, Justin Buchholz, who's retired, TJ Dillashaw came out of there, Joey Benavidez, a bunch of guys. But he came back. It was a great fight. It was awesome to see a 40-year-old, already Hall of Fame fighter such as Faber come back, get a huge win over an up-and-coming young guy, and especially get it the way he did. He hasn't had a knockout in so long. It was just great to see him come back and win in such, emphatic fashion.
We also have a boxing match upcoming.
Yes, there's a big boxing match in Baltimore. Baltimore's own son, Gervonta Davis, who kind of, made his name, A, getting crazy knockouts of people, and B, being, under the tutelage of Floyd Mayweather. He fought on the undercard of the Mayweather-McGregor fight, and it's just good, it's fun to see a guy come up from Baltimore, still trains in Baltimore under his original coach from when he was an amateur, and it's his homecoming fight to defend the WBA Super Featherweight title against Ricardo Nunes, and unfortunately boxing tends to kind of stack the deck when they want a certain outcome. Gervonta Davis isn't going to take a fight that's super risky for him at this point in his career and at home, so I think it's going to be an early knockout for Davis against Ricardo Nunes. But either way, it's fun. It's a big moment for Baltimore. It's cool for him to have a fight at home. Be fun to have a title fight in the city, and it should be a good time.
Indeed. And moving on to the preview of the main event, UFC 240, Holloway versus Edgar, and start by, I guess, talking about the co-main event in this.
Yeah.
You have Chris Cyborg against Felicia Spencer. And, this is going to be an interesting one because you're talking about, Cyborg coming off the loss to Amanda Nunes, but if I'm not mistaken, her only loss in her career, right?
She lost her debut, so it's her second loss in her career, but it's her first loss in God knows how. I don't remember. I don't remember when she debuted, but a very, very long time. She's, kind of thought of as undefeated to most people, and she's just so devastating throughout her career. So she's just always been this monster, as if she's kind of undefeated anyway, And she's going against Felicia Spencer, who's a former Invicta champ in the featherweight division, and Felicia Spencer is a great grappler who has a real interesting striking game. She's real busy, likes to throw a lot of weird stuff. Not a lot of weird stuff, but very varied striking. She throws a lot of high kicks, very busy, pretty quick, and great submissions. And a lot of her wins are by submission. And she has a notable win over a fellow former Invicta champ in Megan Anderson, who was kind of brought into the UFC as a challenger for Cyborg. A lot of people were looking at this woman out in Invicta just kind of running through people, and she has a really good striking game. She's a very, very large woman for the division. She's like over 6 feet tall, just has this huge reach. And they brought Megan Anderson in and put her up against Holly Holm, and I think Holly Holm won. Holly Holm kind of dominated her the whole fight, and there went the Megan Anderson versus Chris Cyborg fights, and then they put her up, put Megan Anderson in there against Felicia Spencer, and Spencer took home the victory, and so propelling her to a fight against Cyborg, which, it's a good fight, I guess. It's as good a fight as you're going to make, but Cyborg is just so, crazy powerful and quick and dominant that, I don't see anybody I don't really see anybody touching her or giving her trouble outside of Amanda Nunes. So I think this is perhaps a bad fight for Felicia Spencer, but it's the same thing you say about every Cyborg opponent, so I don't know.
Yeah, so why do you figure they decide to make this the co-main event on this card?
Because Cyborg. Cyborg's such a big name. She's one of the bigger names they have in the company right now. You go down your list and you go through your John Jones, your Conor McGregor, your Donald Cerrone and stuff, and Cyborg's probably one of the, 10 biggest names to draw attention. Just as big as Frankie Edgar and Max Holloway, for sure.
I mean, so if she does take an upset loss here, that'd be a pretty big story, huh? 2 in a row?
Oh, yeah. It'd be a huge story. And it was a huge story when Nunes knocked her out. And a lot of people thought that was going to happen. Because Nunes is a monster. But that's the question, is how does she come back from that loss? If she is in a bad headspace, maybe that crazy knockout just rattled her cage, and maybe she won't have the confidence to get off the shots that she needs to. I mean, we've certainly seen that happen before, but I mean, something tells me Cyborg. I don't know. She has some of the best coaches in the game, and Jason Perillo, and she's just looked so great throughout her entire career that I can't really see her coming back and not looking great. And like I said, the only person I can see really touching her is Amanda Nunes, and that's because Amanda Nunes has, insane power in her hands and really long limbs. I don't think there's anybody else that can withstand the striking game of Chris Cyborg. You have to have an incredible chin and a way to get back and hit her back. And Felicia Spencer, I think, is a little undersized for Cyborg. I think Cyborg's gonna kind of bully Felicia Spencer pretty badly, and if I was gonna put money on it, which I wouldn't, because this is probably the biggest favorite on the whole card, is probably Cyborg over Felicia Spencer, especially if you want to put money on like a first round KO. That's probably a huge favorite. So I think it's unfortunate for Felicia Spencer, but she's had a great career in the UFC so far. So, Cyborg's. I'm kind of interested to see what happens with this division once Cyborg kind of ages out. She's a little older than most of the women and a little more mileage on her, but if you're still winning in dominant fashion and knocking people out, then why retire, right? So I think it's going to be the Cyborg Amanda Nunes show for quite a while.
So that'll be interesting to see how she responds to the loss, but more than likely it will be with a win.
Yeah, I would say so.
And that gets us to our main event of Max Holloway versus Frankie Edgar, a featherweight title fight.
Yeah, so this is an interesting fight for a ton of reasons. First off, it's stylistically, it's a real interesting matchup. It's the one thing that we haven't seen Max Holloway fight really in his career is a really good wrestler. Right, I rewatched an older fight of his against Dennis Bermudez, who's also a fantastic wrestler, a great takedown game, great top control, and he wasn't really able to get Holloway down that much, and that was early in Holloway's career. That being said, Bermudez likes to strike a little more. He has power in his hands. He's got some, one-shot knockouts. He likes to throw a lot of kicks, so he doesn't mix it up as much as Frankie Edgar does, but he does have that great takedown game and good top control, and so I was interested to see how he responded. And Max Holloway lost that fight by decision, but I don't think he should have. I think that he actually won the fight with distance control and just outstriking Bermudez. But the couple of takedowns that Bermudez was able to get, even though he wasn't able to hold Holloway down, he was controlling the fight in those moments, so he got the decision on the judges' scorecards.
Now, have both of these guys been in between weight classes?
Yes. So, Holloway has fought most of his career at featherweight, and has went up to lightweight in his last fight against Dustin Poirier, which we did a video on. Go check it out if you want to see what happened. Against Dustin Poirier for the interim lightweight title, and he lost. And it was a rematch between him and Poirier, and the big thing that we saw there, I think, was the size and power advantage that Poirier had over Holloway. And Frankie Edgar is a former lightweight champ. He beat BJ Penn one of the greatest fighters in history, one of the most beloved to take the title, and beat him twice, 3 times later on in that terrible round of BJ's. I hope he's done. But
so is Frankie coming down for in weight for this fight, or has he already been at the featherweight?
Frankie's been a featherweight for quite some time. Frankie lost his title in a couple, I think, back-to-back fights against Benson Henderson, where he lost decisions, and basically just realized, he's just undersized for the division. And he had a ton of success at lightweight, and was able to take shots from huge guys like Benson Henderson and Gray Maynard and everybody like that. And those guys are, like, as far as Frankie's concerned, those guys are huge. Those dudes are walking around at probably 180, 190, and Frankie's this dude that doesn't have to cut a ton, like barely didn't cut weight at all for lightweight at 155, and barely has to cut weight for 145. So he's not really a lightweight. So he's not huge for the featherweight division. Actually, Max Holloway is a bigger person than Frankie Edgar. But Frankie Edgar spent more of his time at lightweight just because it was where he was comfortable and he was having success. Why cut weight if you don't have to? So once he started getting overpowered, he dropped down to the featherweight division. And he's had multiple title shots. I think he fought Aldo twice. And I think this is going to be, with how old he is and where he is in his career, this is probably his last title shot, if I was going to guess. Unless, if he loses and, gets crazy knockouts or something, it's not out of the realm of possibilities for him to earn another title shot. But, 3 unsuccessful title shots in, 4 or 5 years that's more than most people get, So they've both fought at lightweight. They both fight at featherweight most of the time these days. But Max is the king of that division. He's the best featherweight of all time. He's not had quite as long a title run as Jose Aldo or anything, but he beat Jose Aldo handily twice. Has beat every other comer they put in front of him.
So he's a definite favorite here, then.
Yes, he's a pretty big favorite right now. Last I saw, he was, I think, plus 450 or something like that, and Edgar was he was minus 450, and Edgar was a plus like 250 or 300 underdog. So it's a really interesting fight style-wise, because Holloway kind of has a game, like the game that Edgar doesn't do well against. In that, if people are able to use their movement to avoid the takedown game from Edgar. Edgar is a really good boxer. He's really quick, but he's small and he's short and he's squat. So he has to kind of get on the inside of you. He has to get inside most people's punching range to initiate his takedown game. He has a real good like double leg. He has a real good single leg, so he can shoot from farther out. But he doesn't like to. He likes to mix it up. He likes to keep people guessing by constantly changing levels, constantly faking takedowns, using a lot of head movement, a lot of feints. And his game is mostly predicated on boxing his way into your clinch range, and then getting the takedown and controlling the top game and landing a ton of ground and pounding people out, which we've seen him do to a ton of guys. We saw him do it to Yair Rodriguez, who has a great long-range striking game. He has huge kicks in the long distance kind of area where you're just going to see guys landing jabs and kicks and leg kicks and stuff like that. But Yair Rodriguez will throw crazy back kicks and crazy head kicks, and he's got these real long legs, and he's kind of like a Taekwondo style. And we saw Frankie Edgar easily figure that out, easily get inside the range and get the takedowns and control Yair Rodriguez and get a bunch of ground and pound and win the fight. But the difference between a Rodriguez and a Max Holloway is the boxing game. Max Holloway is a really, really, really good boxer in both ranges, at long range and in close.
Well, he's just a guy that throws a lot of strikes and lands a lot of strikes, right? That's kind of his thing.
Yeah, he's kind of like a kind of Nick Diaz style, where he just peppers you with kind of half power shots the whole time, just constantly lands shots, and he cuts angles, and just his like moving forward aggressive boxing game is really, really good. But he doesn't have that one shot power. He's not going to put you out with one clean shot to the chin and have you flat down on the mat. He's going to land, a ton of strikes so that he actually builds up the damage and puts you out later in the fight. Which is what we saw happen to Brian Ortega. We saw Brian Ortega take a ton of damage and actually get a doctor stoppage in between rounds after the 4th round because he just couldn't take it, right? So I think one of the things that we're going to see happen, or one of the ways that this fight could play out, is that Holloway is able to keep it at range and keep it at a long boxing range and keep Edgar out of it, which Edgar had trouble with against Cub Swanson in his last fight. Cub actually had some successes cutting angles and landing those big shots from the outside and keeping Edgar away from him. The one thing that I think might play to Edgar's favor is Holloway is really good at cutting angles and changing where he is, changing his stance when he's moving forward. When he's moving backwards, he doesn't do that as much. And Frankie is typically an aggressive fighter who throws shots straight down the center. And so if Frankie is able to get Holloway on his back foot and keep Holloway backing up in a straight line and go for a takedown, he might be able to switch it up and get a takedown on Holloway and control him. Because I think Frankie Edgar's wrestling game is good enough to control Holloway. Holloway has a great ground game. He has great submissions, but I don't know that he has, the power and the ability to keep standing up against a guy with such good wrestling in Frankie Edgar. So, like I said, it's interesting because it's it's a style that Edgar has struggled against, but it's also the one style that we haven't really seen Holloway face. We haven't seen Holloway face somebody who has such a strong wrestling game and such a varied game in how he controls where the fight takes place and how he mixes it up. Edgar is a guy that throws a lot of kicks, but also boxes a lot and then gets in and gets the takedown. And he level changes a lot and he throws a lot of fakes. So it's going to be interesting to see how Holloway handles that and how Holloway is able to adapt against a strong wrestler with a great takedown game. So it's, like I said, it's Edgar's weakness against what a lot of people think might be Holloway's weakness. But we have yet to see that. So if Holloway comes through and beats Edgar and in dominant fashion, I will definitely say Holloway is the greatest featherweight of all time.
Well, I haven't watched as much film on these fighters as you have, but, based on everything I've seen out of Holloway, I think should definitely be the favorite here. I've got, him winning, and we may very well come to that conclusion. I also think that Cyborg's got a relatively easy fight for her to do here.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, I think the Cyborg fight is, unfortunately for Felicia Spencer and a lot of people's minds, it's kind of a foregone conclusion. But the Holloway Edgar fight, man, it's almost a legacy defining fight for both guys. If Holloway puts away and beats Edgar, a former lightweight champ who is for sure already a Hall of Famer and one of the most cherished MMA figures in history, if he puts Edgar away, he becomes the greatest featherweight of all time. But if Edgar beats Holloway and takes that featherweight title, he becomes one of 7 people in history. He becomes the 7th person in history to hold a title at 2 weight classes. Not concurrently. He's not in that. He's not lightweight and featherweight champ. But having a title at 2 weight classes in your career and beating a guy as brilliant as Max Holloway has been in the past few years would be an incredible feather in Edgar's hat and would be a great way to go into the end of his career. And he's already in the Hall of Fame, but he would be up there in the discussion for greatest of all time for sure.
And should that happen, it'd be interesting to see how long he could hold that title.
Yeah, honestly, with how crazy Max Holloway has been, I wouldn't be surprised if they gave Holloway an instant rematch upon losing. But it really depends on how the fight looks. If Edgar goes out there and dominates Holloway, they're not going to do the rematch. They'll make Holloway fight somebody else. But if it's a close decision and Edgar gets this, Edgar gets a unanimous or a split decision and it's a close fight, then we would probably see the rematch. But Edgar's one of those guys who could beat anyone in the world in his weight class on any given night. It just depends on how it goes.
So that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. We got more of these videos coming to you. Wait, I don't even know what we're talking about.
Oh, damn. All right.
I didn't say we were ready.